They say that some land is born sick, that a poison can seep into the soil and lie dormant for generations, waiting. My family's land was sick. We had wealth, we had respect, but the Barton bloodline was withering on the vine. We prayed to God for a child. We didn't know something else was listening from the darkness beneath our feet, something ancient and hungry.
The high noon of a July day beat down on the county, one of those days during the dog days of summer, when the air hangs thick and heavy, promising a thunderstorm that never comes. They say spirits walk more easily in that kind of heat, when the veil between worlds thins to a shimmering haze. Inside the Barton family chapel, the air was even more stifling, thick with the scent of old money, expensive mahogany, and quiet desperation.
The flickering flame of an oil lamp cast dancing shadows upon the walls. On the polished wood, the silhouette of a man was hunched in prayer, his back bowed as if under an immense weight. That man was none other than Mr. Barton. He was dressed for solemnity today, a fine dark linen robe, a simple head covering, his bare feet in plain wooden sandals. He looked every bit the patriarch, the master of the sprawling estate that bore his name.
With a deliberate slowness, he took 3 sticks of incense from a porcelain jar. He leaned forward, touching their tips to the lamp's flame. The oil-soaked wicks caught instantly, and a tiny speck of glowing ash fell onto an old brass dish with a faint tink. Outside, the distant, mournful toll of a church bell echoed from town, a lonely sound that seemed to thrum in time with the earnest beating of his own heart.
Mr. Barton raised the smoldering incense to the level of his eyes, bowed his head, and spoke his prayer aloud, his voice a low rumble in the stillness. Amen. I speak to the ancestors of the Barton line, to the grandfathers, the great-uncles, the matriarchs, all who have passed beyond the veil. It is I, William Barton, your descendant and steward of this family, now past my 40th year. Our coffers are full, our lands are vast, but our house is empty.
He remembered the words of his father, spoken so long ago. A man and wife must live in harmony, in faith, and in duty. They must honor the past to build the future. We have lived by those words, he whispered, his voice cracking. My wife and I, we have been good to each other. We have been good to this land. And yet fate has granted us no heir to carry on the name. He pressed his forehead to the floorboards, the impact a dull, hollow thump that echoed in the silence. I beseech you, his voice was thick with unshed tears. I beseech the spirits of my family, look down upon us, take pity on our plight, and grant us a child, a son, a daughter, it matters not, just a soul to light the candles when we are gone, someone to tend the graves and speak our names so we are not forgotten.
If our prayer is answered, I swear it, we will restore this chapel, build a new wing for the church. We will give charity to the entire county. We will not forget our debt to our ancestors or to God. After his vow, he planted the 3 incense sticks into the sand-filled censer. He clasped his hands, bowed his head one last time, and then slowly, stiffly, rose to his feet. The faint light of the lamp caught the high planes of his cheeks, revealing the deep-etched lines around his eyes, the permanent furrows in his brow,
the roadmap of years filled with worry and quiet sorrow. Finished, he pushed open the heavy chapel door and walked toward his home. It was a grand house, a 2-story manor built from the dark, sturdy timber of the cypress swamps, the largest and most imposing home in the county. It stood just across a low ornamental fence from the chapel, a constant reminder of the family legacy he was failing to continue. As he stepped on to the shaded porch, he saw his wife, Eleanor, already waiting for him inside. She sat in her usual chair, her hands working a string of wooden prayer beads, her eyes fixed on him with a familiar, anxious gaze. She waited for him to come in and sit heavily on the settee. Without a word, she poured a glass of cool water from a pitcher and offered it to him. "You were in there for so long, William," she said softly. "What did you pray for?" He took the glass from her, raised it to his lips, but then hesitated, setting it down untouched. His gaze drifted past her to the sun-bleached yard outside. He sighed, a long, weary exhalation of breath. "I was speaking to my father, to all of them, asking for a child, Eleanor. I know it's a fool's hope, but what else is there to do but ask?" His wife's hands stilled on her beads, her eyes never leaving his careworn face. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence in the grand house was a living thing, broken only by the faint, happy shouts of children playing on the dirt road outside their gate. The sound, once a pleasant backdrop to their lives, now served only to amplify their own quiet emptiness, to sharpen the edges of their shared grief. Mr. and Mrs. Barton were both in their late 40s. They had been married for nearly 30 years, but heaven, it seemed, had not seen fit to bless them. Theirs was a house without a future. It was a sorrow that had settled deep into their bones. It turned Mr. Barton quiet and somber, and it made his wife sigh in the dead of night, turning her face to the wall so he wouldn't hear her silent tears. They had traveled the entire state, seeking help from renowned doctors in the city to secluded folk healers hidden away in the deep woods. If they heard a whisper of someone who could help, they would pack their bags and go. Once, on the advice of a woman at the market, they'd made a pilgrimage to a remote mountain shrine, burning 100 candles and leaving offerings, begging for a child, any child, as long as it was their own flesh and blood. But the prayers went unanswered. Her womb remained stubbornly, achingly empty. Last year, someone told them of a 3-generation family remedy, a potent tincture that was said to balance the humors, enrich the blood, and guarantee a child. Eleanor had been so hopeful, she'd paid 5 gold coins for it without a second thought. She brought it home and drank the bitter brew daily, as if it were a religious rite. Mr. Barton, who hated the taste of bitterness, still forced himself to swallow a bowlful each night. Each time he would grit his teeth, his throat clenching, tears welling in his eyes from the vile fish bile flavor. But for the hope of a child, he drank every last drop. A month passed, then 3, then 6. Nothing changed. The nights in their bedroom were silent, devoid of the infant cries that should have filled them with joy. When he sat with the other landowners in town meetings, he saw men his age surrounded by their children, sons who were already learning to read and write, younger ones who already knew how to ride a horse out to the fields. A bitterness would churn in his gut. Sometimes, after a few drinks, one of the men would clap him on the back and joke, "Why the long face, Barton? You look like you've lost your last dollar." He would force a smile, but at home he would stare at the ceiling and sigh into the darkness. The wealthier he became, the more he yearned for a child. He craved to hear a small voice call him father. He longed to hold a child in his arms, to be able to report to his ancestors that the next generation was secure. In the last decade, the Barton fortune had swelled. His land holdings had expanded by 500 acres. His 8 storehouses were overflowing with grain, and his chests were heavy with gold and silver. But surrounded by all that wealth, his heart felt like an empty, echoing cavern. All this work, all this struggle, for who? The thought was a constant, tormenting presence. A lifetime of toil, and in the end, no one to inherit. What is the point? The thought felt like a physical hole being carved in his chest. He remembered his own father on his deathbed, gasping, "Hurry and marry, son! Give me a grandson! I am an old man. If I face my ancestors without having seen my grandson, I will be shamed in the afterlife." But his father had passed away suddenly, just 6 months after his wedding. He died with his eyes wide open, his mouth locked in a silent gasp. They had to tie his jaw shut with a red ribbon for the burial.
He recalled a strange encounter years ago. A visit to a church where an old, wizened priest had stared at his face, asked him a few probing questions, and then said bluntly, "Your house is blessed with wealth, sir, but your path to children is blocked. You and your wife must pray. You must be charitable. You must build up virtue to have any hope. Or perhaps you should have a learned man look at the geomancy of your land. Sometimes the earth itself can bless a house with fortune, but curse the family line. The fault may not lie with you." At the time, Barton had just mumbled a polite reply, tired of superstitions. But now, standing in his yard, the priest's words came back to him with a jolt. He looked up at the moss-covered roof tiles, weathered by decades of sun and rain, and then to the sky. "My family has always been righteous. Our ancestors were honorable people. For 100 years, the line has never been broken. Why should it end with me? Could it be the land? Is the feng shui wrong?"
An idea, unsettling and desperate, began to take root in his mind. This time, the hope it brought was more fervent, more urgent than ever before. But it was a fool's hope. He'd hired 8 different masters of feng shui. They had him move ancestral graves, chop down a massive oak that shaded the side gate, even build an elaborate rock garden in front of the house. But children were like ghosts. The more he sought them, the more they eluded him.
"William," his wife's voice pulled him from his dark reverie. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the deep resolve in her eyes. "I have been thinking about this for months now. Perhaps you should take another wife." He flinched as if struck. "A second wife, William. Someone young, healthy, someone who might be able to give you the air you need."
He shot to his feet. "Eleanor, what are you saying? Have you lost your mind? Why would you even think of such a thing? Do you truly want to share your husband, to live that life?"
"No woman wants that life," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "But I am old now. I think of you, of this family, of its future. A woman who cannot bear a child is like a silkworm that spins no silk. She is like a fallow field that grows no wheat. If we continue on like this, I will die with the sin of having failed our ancestors,
failed your parents, and failed you.
Don't say that, he insisted, his voice softening slightly. It is not your fault. A child is a gift from God, and if God does not grant it, we must bear it. It is not for a lack of trying on your part. But the whispers, William, the talk from our relatives, the jeers behind our backs. A barren tree bears no fruit. A barren woman bears no child. They say our family must have committed some terrible sin for God to curse us with extinction. I hear it, and it feels like a knife twisting in my gut. If you take a second wife, I will not be angry. I will not be resentful. I only want you to have a child, so that when we are both gone, you will not have to face your ancestors in shame.
His face hardened. I am the head of the Barton family, he said, his voice low and firm. Do you think I would betray the teachings of my own father? Do you remember what he taught me when I brought you into this house? He gestured to a carved plaque on the wall. Its 4 words, loyalty, honor, family, faith, faded by time. The code is clear. 1 house, 1 wife. Preserve virtue and honor. Do not sow discord for the sake of an heir. For you to ask this of me is to ask me to defy my own ancestors. He looked directly into her eyes, his tone softening again. You came to me when I had nothing but 2 empty hands. For 30 years you have stood by me through storms and hardship. You have never been lacking in love, never been wanting in loyalty. And now you want to push me into the arms of another? I will not do it. I will not become a man without honor, without gratitude. But the family line, the chapel, she whispered. He fell silent, his gaze drifting back to the plaque. He let out a long, slow breath. I spoke with my ancestors last night. If fate dictates that we will have no child of our own, then when the time comes, I will choose a worthy young man and adopt him as my own. But this talk of a second wife, we will not speak of it again. I forbid it. You have decided then? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. My heart is settled. We are one family. We live one life, and we will share one grave. I would rather bear the shame of being childless than the sin of being faithless. You have been with me my whole life. How could I forget 100 years of devotion for the sake of a single word?
That evening, after a silent dinner, Mr. Barton changed into a simple work shirt and prepared to go out. As he stepped into the main hall, his wife looked up from her task of clearing the table. "Are you really going out?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "The night air is coming in. The fields are damp and treacherous in the dark. I don't feel right about you going alone." "I'm just going to check the fields," he replied, his voice calm. "Dennis told me he saw strange lights near the southern cornfields the last few nights. Said he found footprints in the grass and a torn piece of a shirt snagged on a bamboo stalk. I won't sit idly by while some vagrant helps himself to our harvest. It could ruin the whole crop."
But you are the master of this estate, she pleaded. Let the watchman handle it. Why must you go yourself? He looked at his wife, his eyes softened. This estate, I built it with my own 2 hands. These fields are my flesh and blood. I've counted every stalk of rice, every ear of corn. When I hear of trouble, I cannot rest. Besides, he added, I need the walk to clear my head. Then go, she relented, but don't be too late. I'll worry. He smiled faintly. Don't worry. I'll have Dennis with me. Go to bed early. You need your rest. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. I'll be back soon. He stepped out into the yard and called for his most loyal servant. A few moments later, the 2 of them, master and servant, lit a torch and set off down the dark, rutted path that bordered the fields. They walked along the edge of the cornfield, the torchlight painting flickering orange arcs on the drooping stalks. They were chatting about village gossip when Dennis suddenly stopped, his hand shooting out to point. "Sir," he whispered, "over there, by the banana trees. I think I think there's someone lying on the ground.
Barton squinted, his heart giving a sudden lurch. The moon, pale and thin, cast a cold blue-tinged light over the scene. Dennis was right. There, at the edge of a dense thicket of banana trees, a man's gaunt figure was sprawled across the path. He was wearing nothing but rags, his face obscured by a tattered straw hat. He lay as still as a corpse. After the initial shock passed, Barton nodded to his servant. "Go see if he's alive." Dennis crept forward, holding the torch out. As he was about to touch the man, the figure stirred, letting out a faint, reedy moan. "Water. A sip of water." The beggar's voice was a dry rasp. His eyes fluttered open. In the torchlight, the whites of his eyes were a milky, clouded yellow, like the film that gathers on stagnant water. Barton knelt beside him, his brow furrowed. "Old man, who are you? Why are you lying out here in the middle of the night?" "A beggar," the man rasped. "From up north. Haven't eaten in 3 days. I collapsed here. Thought I was done for."
Barton looked closer and saw the man's feet were swollen, his stomach concave. His frown deepened. "Dennis, give the men your water." The servant quickly uncorked his flask and poured a little into the cap, holding it to the old man's lips. Dennis then took a roasted sweet potato from his pocket and, moved by pity, offered it to the beggar. The old man snatched the potato, as if afraid he'd change his mind, cramming it into his mouth and chewing ravenously. Weak and dehydrated, he nearly choked on the dry food, but a few more sips of water saw him through.
A few minutes later, the beggar managed to sit up. He pressed his trembling hands together, his voice still a hoarse whisper. Thank you, masters." "It's late and dark," Barton said. "Why are you wandering the fields instead of seeking shelter in the village?" "They chased me out," the beggar said, a shudder running through his thin frame. "From the shacks down by the river. Said I smelled too foul." He looked up at Barton, his strange, clouded eyes seeming to see more than they should. "You are a kind man, sir. To meet you tonight, I must have done some good in a past life." Barton chuckled, a short, humorless sound. "To help a man in need is common decency. Don't trouble yourself with debts of gratitude. It's late. If you have nowhere to go, you can come back to my house. There's an empty room in the west wing. You can rest there. When you're well, you are free to leave." The old man was overcome with gratitude, bowing his head to the ground. "Thank you, master, thank you." Barton grunted, instructing Dennis to help the old beggar back to the house while he completed his patrol of the fields alone. By the time he returned, the moon was hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds, and a cold wind was blowing in from the fields, rustling the trees with a sound like whispering. He had barely stepped onto the porch when Dennis hurried out to meet him, bowing low. "Sir, the old beggar you sent me back with, he's awake now. He's been sitting cross-legged in the annex, muttering to himself like he's praying. He said that when you returned, I was to bring him to you immediately. He says it's urgent." Barton frowned. "Strange. What could be so urgent? Bring him to the main house. Let's see what this is about."
As Barton entered the house, his wife was still waiting up for him. Her worried expression eased when she saw him, but before she could speak, Dennis led the old beggar into the room. In the flickering lamplight, the old man seemed even more withered, like a dying tree root, his eye sockets like deep, dark pits. Seeing Mr. and Mrs. Barton seated on the fine settee, the beggar bowed so low his forehead almost touched the floor. "Master, mistress," he rasped, "thank you for saving this worthless one's life. I do not wish to disturb you, but there is something I must say. If I do not speak, I fear I will regret it for the rest of my days."
Barton, in the middle of lighting his pipe, paused and narrowed his eyes. If it is only to offer thanks, then don't trouble yourself. I told you, I helped you out of charity, not for reward. But if you have something to say, then say it. It is late, and I am in no mood for idle chatter. The old beggar lifted his head, his throat working as he drew a long, slow breath. Master, mistress, forgive my forwardness, but is it not true that for more than 20 years this house has been without the blessing of a child?
Mr. Barton froze, the pipe halfway to his lips. He and his wife exchanged a stunned glance. Barton shot a look at his loyal servant, but Dennis just shook his head, equally bewildered. In a suspicious tone, Barton asked, How could you possibly know of this?" The old beggar didn't answer directly. He stared past them, out into the dark garden, and asked another question. "Forgive me again, but the kapok tree in your back garden, was it not planted more than 80 years ago?" Barton was now utterly astonished. The tree had been planted by his own grandfather. It was a giant, its 9 main branches spreading out to cover a third of the entire garden.
Before Barton could confirm it, the beggar continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Beneath the roots of that tree, there is a mound of earth, and buried about 6 feet deep in that mound, a great evil makes its den." "What are you talking about? What kind of evil?" "A serpent spirit," the beggar said, his voice barely audible. "A python of immense age and power. It lives there, coiled 7 times around the taproot of the tree. Its head points toward your front gate, its tail toward your family chapel. It is this creature that severs your family's lifeblood. Your crops will still grow, your wealth will still accumulate, but the path to children, it leads to a dead end."
Barton stared at his wife, then back at the beggar, his face a mask of disbelief. "You must have proof for such a wild claim. My family has lived on this land for 3 generations. We have worked this garden. We have never seen any sign of such a creature." The beggar reached into the folds of his rags and pulled out a piece of something dry and brittle, folded like a withered leaf. He placed it gently on the table. "Look at this, master. This is its shed skin. I found it at the base of the kapok tree just now. The serpent has lived for so long it has become a spirit. Its eyes are red as coals. Its body is long as several carpets laid end to end. It does not reveal itself to ordinary people. Only those with the second sight or those with a heavy aura of death about them can see it. Before I became a beggar, I spent many years studying the old ways. These things do not escape my notice." Mr. Barton tentatively reached out and touched the piece of skin. A profound, unnatural coldness shot up his arm, and he recoiled as if burned. The beggar looked at him with knowing, pitying eyes. "I have traveled to many places, seen many houses, but few have an aura as prosperous and yet as malignant as this one. This land makes you rich, but it extinguishes your line. This serpent spirit has lived here for a long, long time. It is the source of your curse." Barton stumbled from his chair, rushing to the old man and guiding him to a seat. He clasped his hands together. "Master," he pleaded, "forgive us. We were blind and did not recognize a great sage. Please tell us, is there any way to break this curse?" "To repay you for saving my life," the beggar said, "I will tell you a way. Tomorrow night is the full moon, the night when the yin energy is at its peak. you must prepare a ritual altar. First, you must use the blood of a rooster mixed with something from your own body, a lock of hair, a fingernail clipping, to create a lure to draw its spirit out. The moment the serpent spirit appears, you must strike it dead with a blade that has been anointed with your own blood. Only then can the curse be broken. But remember, he warned, his voice grave, tomorrow night all women and children must be gone from this house. Now it is late. Tomorrow I will help you make all the necessary arrangements to destroy this evil thing. Mr. Barton, trembling, thanked him profusely, then ordered Dennis to prepare a feast for their honored guest. That night, Mr. and Mrs. Barton sat together in silence, their eyes fixed on the piece of snakeskin, a chilling dread coiling in their hearts.
The following day, an unnatural gloom hung over the Barton estate. The sun was a pale, sickly disk behind a sheet of gray clouds. As instructed by the old beggar, Mr. Barton had Dennis procure a pure white rooster and gather fresh yarrow and wormwood from the garden. From the sealed ancestral chest in the chapel, Barton retrieved a heavy, sharpened dowel, a short, single-edged sword, its steel dark with age, meant for ceremony, not combat. It felt unnaturally cold in his hands.
By late afternoon, the ominous sky pressed down on the house. Eleanor, her face a pale mask of fear, followed the beggar's instructions to the letter. She, along with the 3 maids, was to take refuge at the church on Mount Carmel until morning. As the carriage carrying them disappeared over the hill, a profound silence fell over the Barton property, broken only by the rustling of the wind. Behind the house, in the shadow of the great kapok tree, the beggar directed Barton and Dennis in the final preparations. The altar was simple, a small mound of fresh earth upon which they placed a censer, a jug of corn liquor, a bowl of rice, a bowl of salt, 7 hard-boiled eggs, a bowl of the rooster's blood, and 3 lanterns made with red paper. As the clock in the house struck 10, the beggar took a handful of yarrow leaves, crushed them in his bony hands, and then rubbed the pulp over the eyes of both Mr. Barton and Dennis. He took a small, sharp knife and made a quick, shallow cut on the back of Barton's hand. He let the blood drip onto the dow's blade, anointing the steel. "Climb into the branches of this tree," the beggar commanded, his voice now devoid of its earlier frailty. "Hold the sword ready. When I give the signal, you must leap down and strike. The herbs will grant you the sight for a short time, but remember, you have only one chance. If your hand trembles, if you miss and the spirit escapes, it will bring a terrible ruin upon your entire household." He then turned to the servant. "Dennis, you will hide behind that thicket. I have given you a pouch of blessed ash. When I command it, throw it with all your might. The ash will bind it, and it will not be able to escape." Though his body was trembling uncontrollably, Mr. Barton gritted his teeth and did as he was told. He found a sturdy branch overlooking the mound of earth and crouched there, the cold, bloodied dow clutched in his white-knuckled grip. Once everything was in place, the old beggar wrapped a red cloth around his own head, placed a sprig of wormwood in his mouth, and began to light the incense. He chanted, his voice a low, guttural torrent of ancient, forgotten words. One by one, he scattered the liquor, the rice, and the salt onto the ground. An earthy, damp smell began to rise from the ground, thick and cloying, like smoke from a bog fire. Halfway through his chant, the 3 red lanterns suddenly flared, burning with a ferocious, unnatural intensity.
The beggar seized the bowl of rooster blood and hurled its contents onto the mound of earth at the base of the tree. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened.
Then the ground began to heave. A black shadow coiled upwards from the soil, coalescing into the form of a monstrously large serpent. It was as thick as a man's thigh, its scales shimmering with a dull, leaden color. Its head was wide and flat, and its eyes were like two burning coals, glowing with ancient malice. Its forked tongue, black and long, flickered in and out, tasting the air. "The ash, now!" the beggar shrieked.
Dennis burst from his hiding place, hurling the pouch of ash directly at the serpent's head. The creature recoiled, twisting and writhing as the ash enveloped it. It let out a sound that was not a hiss, but a high, thin wail, like the cry of a terrified child. "Strike it! Kill it now!" Barton, paralyzed with a fear so absolute it was almost holy, acted on pure instinct. He leaped from the branch, a desperate cry torn from his own throat.
The ancient Tao fell in a clean, sharp arc. The serpent twisted, trying to dodge, but Barton's blade was faster. A sickening, wet thud echoed as the blade struck home. Black fluid, thick as tar, welled up and spilled from the grievous wound. The serpent's body convulsed, its massive tail whipping through the air, striking the trunk of the kapok tree with a deafening crack. The whole tree shuddered, leaves raining down.
The creature thrashed one last time and then collapsed, its body twitching in its death throes. The beggar scrambled forward, plunging his own small knife into its flank, and screamed a final incantation into the night. The spirit is slain, the bloodline is freed, the curse is lifted. Mr. Barton fell backward, the Tao slipping from his nerveless fingers and clattering to the ground. He stared at the black twitching mass on the ground, certain his heart would burst from sheer terror. Ignoring Barton's horrified paralysis, the beggar calmly took his knife and slit open the serpent's belly. But what spilled out was not viscera. It was a tangled knot of women's hair, a tiny bone that looked horribly like that of a newborn child, and a folded piece of yellow silk stained with what looked like faded red characters. Barton's legs gave out completely. Sweat poured down his face. The beggar picked up the silk cloth, holding it up to the moonlight. "It is as I thought," he mumbled. "This was a tomb guardian for some other clan. Your land must have been suitable for it, so it came here to cultivate its power, feeding on your family's vitality. But the evil is dead now. The spiritual channels are open. You may bring your wife home. The path for your heir is clear."
In the dissipating mist, the dead serpent lay like a giant macabre shroud. Following the beggar's instructions, they poured the remaining corn liquor over the carcass and set it ablaze. As the deed was done, the first hint of dawn began to break on the horizon. The next morning, as the beggar prepared to leave, he gave one final piece of advice. Have that tree cut down and its roots dug out. Within the year, you will be blessed with a son. This boy will be a prodigy, destined to restore the glory of your family. But you must remember this. From his 6th birthday, he must eat a purely vegetarian diet. If he eats meat, a great misfortune will befall him. In 16 years, I will return. Despite Mr. Barton's offer of a heavy pouch of gold, the old man refused any payment and departed as mysteriously as he had arrived. And it was true. From the night the serpent spirit died, it was as if a fresh breeze had blown through the Barton estate.
The 9-branched kapok tree was felled, and its massive roots dug from the earth. In its place, Barton planted a vibrant bed of golden marigolds. The hens in the coop began laying eggs again. The fish pond teemed with life, and just over 3 months later, Eleanor felt a change within her. One morning, after visiting the church, she felt dizzy and nauseous. Mr. Barton immediately sent for the doctor. After a long examination, the old physician smiled broadly. "Congratulations, Mr. Barton. A happy event is coming to your house. The pulse is strong, the vital energy is flourishing. This is a very good sign."
The news that Mrs. Barton was with child spread through the county like wildfire. Mr. Barton threw a great feast to thank God in the heavens, laying out offerings in the family chapel and inviting the priests to chant prayers of gratitude for 3 straight days. The entire village was invited to celebrate. Everyone praised the Barton family's good fortune, saying the bloodline of dragons and phoenixes would continue. As the months passed and the day of birth grew near, Mr. Barton spared no expense, hiring the most renowned midwife from the state capital to live in the house and care for his wife. The night was the 15th of July. A torrential rain suddenly began to fall, and lightning tore across the sky. It was on this violent night that Eleanor went into labor. The house was thrown into a controlled chaos. Torches and lamps were lit in every room. The air grew thick with the smells of incense, herbal medicines, and the storm outside. The midwife laid a hand on Eleanor's swollen belly, her face grim. "The baby is large, and the position is not quite right. This will be a long labor."
On the bed, Eleanor groaned, her body drenched in sweat. "Push, Mrs. Barton. You can do it," the midwife urged. In the main hall, Mr. Barton paced back and forth, clutching his prayer beads, his eyes never leaving the closed bedroom door. Despite the chill of the storm, sweat beaded on his forehead. Every time he heard his wife's pained cries, he would flinch. He could do nothing but light more incense for his ancestors and pray for a safe delivery. Inside the room, the situation grew dire. After hours of struggle, Eleanor was nearing exhaustion. "The baby is stuck," the midwife yelled. "Get me the surgical knife, quickly!" Another midwife panicked. "You can't mean to cut her. It's too dangerous. If I don't, the baby will suffocate." Outside, a deafening crack of thunder shook the house, and a flash of lightning bleached the porch white. At that exact moment, the midwife inside shouted, "One more push, now!" Eleanor arched her back, letting out a final, ragged scream. A rush of blood, and then, between her legs, a red, squirming form emerged, followed by a lusty, furious wail that rang through the house like a brass bell. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, then erupted in relieved chatter. The midwife, her hands trembling, lifted the baby. "Thank God," she whispered. "It's a boy, a beautiful boy. He must weigh 9 pounds." The midwife quickly cleaned the infant, cut the cord, wrapped him in a silk cloth, and carried him out. When Mr. Barton saw his son's face, his own contorted with emotion. His hands shook as he reached out to take the child. The moment the baby was settled in his arms, he instantly stopped crying. He opened his large, dark eyes, and his tiny mouth moved as if trying to speak his father's name. Mr. Barton looked down at his son, and tears he hadn't shed in 30 years streamed freely down his face. This child was the last drop of blood of his lineage, the answer to a lifetime of prayers, the sweet fruit after more than 20 years of bitter longing.
From the day the baby, whom Barton named Caleb, was born, it was as if the last of the curse was washed away. The flowers in the garden bloomed brighter, The crops in the fields yielded double, and the servants of the house enjoyed a long period of prosperity and health. And Caleb himself was different. He was a prodigy. By the time he was 2, he could recognize dozens of words from his father's books. By 5, he was preternaturally calm and insightful. The most vicious guard dogs on the estate, who snarled at any stranger, would whine and lie down at his feet, offering their heads to be petted. By 10, his father had hired him a tutor, but it was a mere formality. Caleb seemed to learn things after seeing or hearing them only once. He also possessed an unnerving skill with a hunting rifle, able to hit a silver dollar from 100 yards away. More strangely, he was drawn to the water. He could swim the length of the wide pond behind the house underwater, staying down for an impossibly long time and emerging on the other side, calm and smiling. Just as his father had done, Caleb was raised on a strict vegetarian diet from the age of 6, a strange boy who grew strong and tall on nothing but bread, vegetables, and fruit. Years passed peacefully. Then, on the boy's 16th birthday, the old beggar returned. He looked just as he had all those years ago. Remembering the debt they owed him, Mr. and Mrs. Barton invited him in for a feast, but the old man refused, getting straight to the point. "Master, mistress, your son Caleb is a gifted soul, but if he remains here in the mortal world, he will not live past the age of 25. His spirit is too strong for a normal life. I have returned as promised to take him with me. Do not stand in his way. Let him follow me and learn the ways of the Spirit. Only then can he master his fate and bring true, lasting prosperity to your line."
Mr. and Mrs. Barton were stunned and heartbroken, but they knew the beggar was no ordinary man, and they knew his words were true. With immense sorrow, they agreed, and so that very night Caleb bid farewell to his parents. He shed his fine clothes for simple traveler's robes, and with nothing but a small pack on his back, he followed the old man out of the gates and down the long road, disappearing into the vast, unknown world. Caleb's journey with the old man, whom he now simply called Master, took him far from the rolling hills and cypress swamps of his home. They traveled north into the jagged ancient heart of the Appalachian Mountains, to a place the Master called Silent Peak, a small mist-shrouded mountain where the world of men felt a world away. The Master's home was a simple, weathered cabin, yet inside it was meticulously clean. On a small altar to a nameless deity, a single bowl of clear water and a stick of fragrant incense were always present. The walls were lined with shelves, groaning under the weight of books, Greek and Roman classics, dense volumes of philosophy and theology, histories of forgotten wars, and hand-copied texts on herbalism, astronomy, and darker, more esoteric arts, all bound in worn leather. For the first year, Caleb's life was one of humble servitude, sweeping the yard, chopping wood, tending the fire. His eyes would often drift south, a homesickness clinging to him like the mountain mist. But slowly, as the Master began his tutelage, Caleb's world expanded. He learned the true strength came not from the body, but from a disciplined mind. He spent the next 2 years immersed in books, his brilliant mind absorbing knowledge like dry earth absorbs rain. He debated philosophy with his Master, learning why a good man values honor over wealth. why a leader must serve his people, and how the single virtue of integrity could build or topple an empire. By his 19th year, the master began to teach him the secret arts, how to read the energies of the land, how to calm troubled spirits, how to identify and neutralize sources of dark power. And finally, he was taught the art of combat. Not the flashy swordplay of duelists, but the deadly, efficient craft of the frontiersman, tracking, knife fighting, and the almost supernatural marksmanship that was his birthright. The quiet boy from the Barton estate was forged into a tall, formidable young man, his words few, but his presence immense.
In Caleb's 5th year on the mountain, trouble came to the valley below. A plague of disappearances began in a small logging settlement downstream. It started with a boy who herded goats. He went to the forest edge in the afternoon and never returned. All they found were his goat tracks, frantic and scattered. The next morning, his body was found by a creek, his eyes wide with a terror that had stolen his soul, a strange, constricting red mark around his neck. Then a young woman vanished while gathering firewood. Then an old trapper. Every few days, another person gone, another soulless corpse found by the water. The villagers whispered of an ancient evil, a primordial river serpent, an old god of that dark forest, angered and now demanding sacrifice.
After the 7th victim, the village elder, desperate, made the arduous journey up Silent Peak to beg the master for help. The master simply looked at Caleb and nodded. "Your training was not for reading books in a quiet room," he said. "Go." That night, Caleb, dressed in simple, dark homespun clothes, his long knife at his hip and a rifle slung over his back, slipped into the haunted woods. He found a high branch in an old oak overlooking a bend in the river where the last body was found, and he waited. The forest grew unnaturally silent.
As the moon reached its zenith, he heard a faint slithering sound. From the dark water, a shape emerged. It was a giant black snake, but as it moved onto the bank, it shimmered and changed, its form twisting into that of a hunched old woman with stringy wet hair and eyes that glowed a sickly yellow. Caleb felt no fear, only a cold purpose. He dropped silently from the tree, his knife already in hand. The creature sensed him, letting out a piercing shriek as it transformed back into the giant serpent, lunging with impossible speed. Caleb was faster. He sidestepped the attack, the creature's jaws snapping shut on empty air, and brought his heavy knife down in a vicious arc, slicing deep into the creature's flank. Dark, foul-smelling ichor pulsed from the wound. The serpent writhed in agony, its tail lashing out, but Caleb was already moving, his blade a blur in the moonlight, striking again and again, until, with a final decisive blow, he severed the monster's head from its body.
Not long after, another evil arose. In a different village, young women began to vanish from their beds, leaving behind nothing but a faint smell of burnt feathers and a single black rooster feather on their pillow. The village elders spoke of a grave cock, a demon that could crow a soul from a sleeping body. After studying his master's ancient texts, Caleb descended the mountain once more. This time, the fight would not be one of brute force. He had the villagers create a ritual circle in the town square, using 7 wooden stakes carved with protective runes. In the center, he placed a live pig as bait. At the stroke of midnight, a blood-curdling crow echoed through the village, a sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. A huge black-feathered rooster, tall as a man, strode into the square. Its eyes burned like embers, and the comb on its head was a shriveled gray piece of flesh that looked like a dead man's face. As it lunged for the pig, Caleb sprang the trap. The 7 stakes erupted with a blinding light, forming a net of energy around the demon. It shrieked, a sound of pure rage, and unleashed a wave of terror that buckled Caleb's knees and made the world swim before his eyes. Clutching the jade amulet his master had given him, Caleb fought back against the psychic assault. He bit his own tongue, the sharp tang of blood clearing his head, and channeled his will into the amulet. A beam of pure green light shot from the jade, striking the gravecock in the center of its chest. The demon exploded in a shower of black feathers and foul-smelling smoke, its final agonized cry absorbed by the silent night. Caleb collapsed, a deep gash on his arm where the creature's wind-like talon had grazed him. But the village was safe. Years passed. When Caleb was a man grown, his master finally called him. "Your path is your own now," he said. "Return to your family, but remember what you have learned. Remember who you are." Caleb journeyed home, but the return was not what he expected. The vibrant village he remembered was now hushed and fearful. As he approached the Barton Manor, he saw the gate hanging off its hinges and the gardens overgrown with weeds. The house itself seemed to sag under a cloud of silent misery. An old housemaid saw him and dropped her water basin, her face draining of all color. "Master Caleb, you've come back," she cried, running to him and falling to her knees. "Your parents, they are not well. It's a curse, sir, a ghost." Inside, he found his parents aged beyond their years, their bodies frail, their minds clouded with fear. "She comes at night," his father whispered, his eyes wide and unfocused. "A woman from the pond. She wants to drag us down." His mother just wept, muttering, "She's come back for us, for what he did." That night, Caleb kept vigil by the murky pond behind the house. As the witching hour approached, a figure rose from the water, the ghost of a young woman, her face a mask of sorrow, her form dripping with spectral pond scum. Caleb did not raise a weapon. He simply stood, his presence a shield of calm power. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady. "Why do you haunt this house?" The spirit, a girl named May, wept, and her story spilled out in a voice that sounded of rustling reeds and stirred mud. Years ago, a rival landowner, Elder Thane, grew jealous of the Barton family's prosperity after Caleb's birth. He hired a root worker, a sorcerer, who murdered May, a poor servant girl, and used her hair, her blood, her very essence to create a curse. He bound her spirit to a wooden effigy, a poppet, and sunk it in the pond, while her physical body was buried in an unmarked grave on unconsecrated ground. The curse was designed to slowly drain the life from his parents and extinguish the Barton line forever. The next morning, Caleb had the pond drained. There, buried in the foul-smelling mud, they found it, a crude wooden doll bound in rags and red thread, its belly stuffed with graveyard dirt and his parents' nail clippings. Following the ghost's directions, he found her remains beneath a gnarled persimmon tree by the river. He gave her a proper burial in the family chapel's grounds, burning the effigy and chanting the rites his master had taught him to release her spirit.
As the last prayer was said, a blood-curdling scream echoed from across the county. The curse, its anchor destroyed and its victim freed, had rebounded upon its creator. Elder Thane was found dead in his home, his body twisted in agony, his mouth full of mud and pondweed. With the curse broken, health and vitality returned to the Barton household. Caleb's parents recovered, their minds clearing as if from a long nightmare. Some years later, when a border war threatened the land, Caleb answered the call. His knowledge of strategy and his uncanny skill in combat made him a legend. He rose to the rank of general, the warden of the South, and brought peace back to the region. He returned home not for glory, but for peace, marrying a good woman from the village and raising 5 strong children. His parents lived to be over 100 years old, their final years filled with the joy they had been denied for so long. And when Caleb himself passed away at the age of 90, the people of the valley built a shrine in his honor, not to a general, but to a protector. They say his spirit still watches over the land, the guardian who faced down the darkness and cleansed the very soil of its ancient curse.